In the quiet suburb of Green Willow, where children's laughter drifted through tree-lined streets and neighbors knew each other by name, Lisa and Mark Henderson had built their dream life. Their blue-doored house stood like a beacon of domesticity, complete with flower boxes that Lisa tended each morning before her coffee grew cold. The arrival of baby Jacob had completed their family portrait. At 3 months old, he was a content child who slept through the night and gurgled happily during the day. But it was Lila, their 5-year-old German Shepherd, who seemed most enchanted by the newest family member. She would lie beside his bassinet for hours, her intelligent brown eyes tracking his every movement. Lisa often marveled at how Lila had adapted to Jacob's presence. During pregnancy, the dog had been unusually attentive, following Lisa around the house and resting her head on her growing belly. When they brought Jacob home from the hospital, Lila had approached with careful curiosity, sniffing gently before settling into her role as unofficial guardian. Mark worked as an architect at a downtown firm, often staying late to perfect his designs. Lisa had taken extended maternity leave from her job at the local library, savoring these early months with Jacob. Their routine was comfortable. Morning walks with Lila pushing the stroller, afternoon naps for both mother and baby, and quiet evenings when Mark returned home to find his family content and peaceful. The first disruption came on a Tuesday night in early autumn. Lisa woke not to Jacob's cry, but to an unfamiliar sound. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the baby monitor. Her heart clenched as she slipped from bed, bare feet silent on the hallway carpet. At the nursery doorway, she froze. Lila sat rigid beside Jacob's crib, her body tense with alertness. The growl emanated from deep in her chest, a sound Lisa had never heard before. The dog's gaze was fixed on the sleeping baby, with an intensity that sent chills down Lisa's spine. "Lila," she whispered. "What's wrong, girl?" The dog's ears twitched, but she didn't break her vigil. Lisa approached cautiously, her mind racing. In 5 years, Lila had never shown aggression toward anyone, least of all a child. The German Shepherd had been raised with the neighbor's toddler, had endured ear-pulling and tail-grabbing with saintly patience. Lisa managed to coax Lila from the room, but sleep eluded her for the rest of the night. When she told Mark over breakfast, he suggested practical explanations. "Maybe she heard something outside," he said, buttering his toast. "You know how protective she is of the house." But Lisa couldn't shake the image of Lila's focused stare, the way the dog had positioned herself like a sentinel. The second night brought the same scenario. Around 2 a.m. the growling started. This time, Mark joined Lisa at the nursery door. They watched as Lila maintained her vigil, her body language speaking of vigilance rather than aggression. But the distinction felt meaningless in the face of their growing anxiety. By the 4th night, a pattern had emerged. Lila would rise from her usual spot at the foot of their bed, pad silently to the nursery, and begin her mysterious watch. The timing was consistent, always between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m., always lasting roughly an hour. Lisa found herself lying awake, waiting for the sound that had become the soundtrack to her nightmares. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usual cheerful demeanor dimmed under the weight of sleepless nights and mounting worry. "Something's wrong with her," Lisa told Mark one morning as they sat over untouched breakfast. Jacob cooed happily in his bouncer, oblivious to the tension surrounding him. Dogs don't just develop aggressive behavior overnight. Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that had become habitual. His work was suffering from lack of sleep, blueprints blurring together as he struggled to concentrate. "Maybe we should see if she's sick." The thought terrified Lisa more than she admitted. Lila had been her companion through college, through the early years of marriage, through the struggles of trying to conceive. The dog was woven into the fabric of their family history. They purchased a night vision camera, Mark installing it carefully on the nursery bookshelf. That evening, they huddled in the living room, watching the grainy black and white feed on the monitor. When Lila's growling began, they saw her clearly. Alert, focused, but not threatening. She never moved closer to Jacob, never bared her teeth. She simply watched and warned. "What is she seeing that we can't?" Lisa whispered. The camera provided no answers, only confirmation of their helplessness. Dr. Evans, their veterinarian, was thorough in her examination. Blood work, neurological tests, even a consultation with a veterinary ophthalmologist, all came back normal. Lila was in perfect health. Sometimes behavioral changes can be stress-related, Dr. Evans suggested. Has anything changed in your routine? New people in the house? Different schedules? But nothing had changed except Jacob's arrival, and Lila had seemed to welcome that addition with enthusiasm. Next came the animal behaviorist, Alistair Henderson, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the county. He spent 3 hours observing Lila, watching her interact with the family during daylight hours. She was gentle with Jacob, playful with Lisa and Mark, showing no signs of the nighttime transformation. Dogs perceive the world differently than we do, he explained, his weathered hands gentle as he examined Lila's ears. Their hearing range extends far beyond ours. They can detect frequencies up to 65,000 hertz, while humans max out around 20,000. She might be responding to a sound you can't hear. This sparked new hope. Perhaps there was a logical explanation after all. They called in specialists. Plumbers to check for water hammer in the pipes, electricians to scan for electromagnetic interference, even an HVAC technician to examine the air circulation system. Each inspection yielded the same result. Nothing unusual detected. The weeks stretched into months. Lisa's friends at the library called to check on her, concerned by her withdrawn behavior during their few visits. She found herself making excuses to avoid social gatherings, embarrassed by her inability to solve what seemed like a simple behavioral problem. Mark's colleague, Jim, stopped by one Saturday afternoon while Mark was working in the garage. He found Lisa in the backyard, watching Lila play fetch with mechanical motions. "Rough patch?" Jim asked, accepting the beer Lisa offered. She found herself pouring out the whole story to this relative stranger, desperate for an outside perspective. Jim listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You know," he said finally, "my sister went through something similar with her cat. Turned out the cat was detecting carbon monoxide from a faulty furnace. Saved the whole family." This sparked another round of inspections. Carbon monoxide detectors were installed throughout the house. Radon testing was conducted. Even the foundation was checked for settling that might cause structural stress. All negative. As autumn deepened into winter, the strain began affecting their marriage. Conversations became tense exchanges about what to do next. Lisa researched rehoming options, a possibility that left her in tears each time she considered it. Mark suggested they move Lila to the basement at night, an idea that felt like betrayal. "She's been with me longer than you have," Lisa said one night, the words sharper than she intended. "And Jacob is our son," Mark replied. "If there's even a chance she might hurt him." They went to bed angry, the first time in their marriage that they'd done so. December brought the first snow, and with it, a new dimension to their nightly ordeal. Lila's behavior became more agitated. She would pace the nursery, her nails clicking on the hardwood floor. The growling grew more frequent, sometimes punctuated by soft whines that sounded almost like distress. Lisa began sleeping in the nursery, a camping chair positioned between Lila and the crib. She would doze fitfully, jolting awake each time the dog stirred. Mark found her there one morning, stiff-necked and exhausted. Lila curled at her feet in apparent contentment. "This can't continue," he said gently. "You're destroying yourself." It was true. Lisa had lost 15 pounds, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. Friends commented on her appearance, their concern evident. Even Jacob seemed affected, fussier during the day, as if sensing his mother's distress. The breaking point came on a frigid January night. Lisa was awakened not by Lila's usual growl, but by frantic barking, sharp, urgent cries that echoed through the house like alarm bells. She flew from bed, Mark close behind her, their hearts hammering with shared terror. They found Lila in the nursery, her front paws on the edge of Jacob's crib, barking with desperate intensity. The dog's entire body trembled with agitation as she nudged the baby with her nose. Lisa's world tilted. Jacob lay unnaturally still, his usual peaceful expression replaced by an alarming pallor. She pressed her ear to his chest, feeling for the rise and fall of breath that wasn't there. "Call 911!" she screamed to Mark, who was already fumbling with his phone. Lila's nudging became more insistent. The dog's cold nose pressed against Jacob's chest, and suddenly, miraculously, the baby gasped. A tiny choking sound escaped his throat, followed by a weak cough that grew stronger. Then, the most beautiful sound in the world. Jacob's angry wail filling the nursery. Lisa scooped up her son, tears streaming down her face as she held his warm, breathing body against her chest. Mark's hands shook as he canceled the emergency call, his voice breaking as he tried to explain the situation to the dispatcher. Lila sat back on her haunches, panting heavily, her tail giving a tentative wag as if asking for approval. The emergency room doctor was thorough, ordering a battery of tests that stretched through the dawn hours. Lisa refused to leave Jacob's side, while Mark alternated between pacing the waiting room and calling relatives with updates. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the pediatric pulmonologist on call, delivered the diagnosis that changed everything. Jacob suffered from infantile sleep apnea, a condition where breathing stops intermittently during sleep, sometimes for dangerous periods. The episodes can be subtle, Dr. Hernandez explained, her voice gentle but serious. Often, parents don't realize anything is wrong until it's too late. You're fortunate your dog was so vigilant. The pieces fell into place with stunning clarity. Lila's acute hearing had detected the cessation of Jacob's breathing, the terrible silence that preceded each apneic episode. Her growling had been an attempt to rouse him, her vigil a life-saving watch that had gone on for months. Lisa and Mark looked at each other across Jacob's hospital bed, the weight of their misunderstanding settling between them. They had nearly given away the very creature who had been protecting their son's life. When they returned home, they found Lila waiting at the door, her tail wagging with restrained enthusiasm. Lisa knelt beside her, burying her face in the dog's fur as she whispered apologies and words of gratitude. "We should have trusted you," she murmured. "We should have known." The sleep study that followed confirmed Dr. Hernandez's diagnosis. Jacob's apnea was moderate but manageable with proper monitoring equipment. A specialized mattress was installed in his crib, one that would sound an alarm if his breathing stopped for more than 20 seconds. Lila's nightly vigils gradually decreased as the medical equipment took over her role. She still checked on Jacob each night, but her posture was relaxed now, the desperate edge gone from her behavior. It was as if she knew that human technology had finally caught up to her natural alarm system. The story of Lila's intuition spread through Green Willow like ripples in a pond. Neighbors who had heard whispers about the problem dog now stopped Lisa on the street to ask about Jacob's health and to praise Lila's remarkable instincts. Mrs. Chen from next door brought over homemade cookies and a new toy for Lila. "I always knew she was special," she said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Dogs know things we don't." The local newspaper ran a feature story about Lila's heroic vigilance, complete with photos of her sitting proudly beside Jacob's crib. The article caught the attention of a national pet magazine, which led to an appearance on a morning television show where Lisa and Mark shared their story with a broader audience. But fame wasn't what mattered to them. What mattered was the quiet trust that had been restored in their home. Lisa found herself watching Lila with new appreciation, noting the subtle ways the dog continued to monitor Jacob's well-being. A lifted ear when the baby stirred, a gentle nudge when he fussed. Small gestures that spoke of ongoing vigilance. Mark returned to his architectural projects with renewed focus, his creativity sparked by their experience. He began designing houses with pet-friendly features, understanding now how integral animals could be to family safety and well-being. Lisa eventually returned to the library, but with a new perspective on the stories she helped patrons find. She started a reading program for children and their pets, believing that the bond between species deserved celebration and nurturing. Jacob thrived under the combined watch of medical technology and canine devotion. By his first birthday, the sleep apnea had diminished significantly, as often happened with the condition. The monitoring equipment remained, but its alarms rarely sounded. On the anniversary of that terrifying January night, Lisa and Mark sat in the nursery, watching Lila perform her evening routine. She would circle Jacob's crib once, satisfy herself that all was well, then settle onto her bed with a contented sigh. "She knew all along," Lisa said softly, her hand resting on Lila's head. "And she never gave up trying to tell us," Mark replied. They had learned something profound about trust, about the limits of human perception, and about the remarkable capabilities of the creatures who share their lives. Lila had taught them that love sometimes speaks in languages we don't immediately understand, but that patience and faith can bridge the gap between species. As Jacob grew into a healthy, active toddler, he and Lila became inseparable companions. She would follow him around the yard, patient as he pulled her ears and used her as a pillow during story time. Their bond was special, forged in those early months when her vigilance had literally kept him breathing. Visitors to the Henderson household often remarked on the unusual closeness between the boy and the dog. Jacob's first word, to everyone's delight, was Lila, a name he pronounced with perfect clarity long before he could manage Mama or Dada. The German Shepherd seemed to understand her special status in the family. She carried herself with quiet dignity, accepting praise and attention with the grace of someone who knew she had earned her place through service rather than mere affection. Dr. Hernandez followed Jacob's case with professional interest, using it as an example of how animals could serve as early warning systems for medical conditions. She began recommending that parents of children with sleep disorders pay close attention to unusual behavior in their pets. Animals are often our first line of defense against medical emergencies, she would tell her residents. Their senses are so much more acute than ours. We should listen when they try to tell us something. The Hendersons became advocates for animal-assisted health monitoring, sharing their story at medical conferences and veterinary seminars. They emphasized the importance of not dismissing unusual pet behavior as mere misbehavior, but rather investigating whether it might signal an underlying problem. Years later, when Jacob was old enough to understand the story, Lisa would tell him about the nights when Lila kept watch over his crib. He would listen with wide eyes, then hug his aging companion with the fierce affection of a child who understood that he owed his life to her devotion. Lila lived to be 13, her final years spent in the honored position of family matriarch. She watched over Jacob as he learned to walk, ride a bicycle, and navigate the complexities of childhood. Even in her senior years, she maintained her protective instincts, though they were now expressed through gentle guidance rather than urgent warnings. When the time came to say goodbye, the entire family was present. Jacob, now 8 years old, held Lila's paw as Dr. Evans administered the final injection. His tears fell silently as he whispered his thanks to the dog, who had been his guardian angel from birth. They buried Lila in the backyard, beneath the oak tree where she had spent countless hours watching Jacob play. A small granite marker bore her name and the dates of her life, along with a simple inscription: Guardian, Protector, Hero. The story of Lila's intuitive protection had become part of the Henderson family legend, passed down through generations as a testament to the remarkable bond between humans and their animal companions. It served as a reminder that love takes many forms, and that sometimes the most important messages come from those who cannot speak our language, but who understand the language of the heart. Jacob grew up with a deep appreciation for animals and their capabilities, eventually becoming a veterinarian himself. He specialized in animal behavior, inspired by his early experience with Lila's protective instincts. His practice became known for taking unusual behavioral complaints seriously, understanding that animals often know things their human companions cannot perceive. In his office, he kept a photograph of himself as a baby with Lila standing guard beside his crib. It served as a daily reminder of the profound connection between species and the importance of listening to what animals try to tell us. The legacy of Lila's vigil extended far beyond the Henderson family. Their story inspired research into animal-assisted medical monitoring, leading to studies on how pets could be trained to detect various health conditions. Service dogs were already being used to alert diabetics to blood sugar changes and to warn epileptics of impending seizures. Lila's case added sleep apnea to the list of conditions that animals could potentially detect and monitor. The house in Green Willow still stands, now home to Jacob's own family. A new generation of children plays in the yard where Lila once kept watch, and a new generation of pets guards over them with the same devotion she once showed. The blue door remains unchanged, a symbol of the enduring nature of home and the protective love that shelters within its walls. If Lila's remarkable story of canine intuition and unwavering protection has touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. We are dedicated to sharing inspiring true stories about animals and their extraordinary abilities to enrich, protect, and transform our lives in ways both seen and unseen.